never will forget going to my first NSO rehearsal, and I'm sitting in the section there, and Rostropovich, and I don't know, we were doing something, Russian. And and the very first note of the orchestra and this wall of sound, that just comes out. I don't even think I could put my bow on the string because I was just so floored.
This conversation I had with today's guest, it made my day. I had such a great time chatting with him. We have so much shared history, though we've led different lives and we're on opposite coasts of the United States. Just a wonderful individual. Can't say enough good things about him. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are chatting today with Alan Stewart, who wears many, many musical hats in the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area. We're going to get into that. But a few of the things he does, he's principal bass of the Williamsburg Symphony and the Roanoke Symphony. He's also played with a ton of groups like the Spoleto Festival. I always forget if it's Spoleto or Spoleto, so apologies for whether I'm getting one of those wrong. But we have a great shared history around that, which we'll get into in the episode. Also, the National Symphony, where he worked with Rostropovich, and some great stories from that. Baltimore Symphony, many, many other groups. And we cover a lot of ground in this conversation. His time in the New World Symphony, how he got into music, those great stories from Rostropovich and the National Symphony, audition preparation, the artist's way, diversity and inclusion in classical music, freelance life, and a lot more. This is a great one. I think we talked for an hour and a half or so, and we could have talked for another hour and a half easily. Definitely a round two will be in the future with Alan, hopefully over there in Baltimore, over here in San Francisco, or somewhere else where we can hang out in person once that can start to happen again. So without further ado, let me welcome today's guest, Alan Stewart.
Hi everyone, this is Trevor Jones, Jason's colleague at Contrabass Conversations and the Double Bass blog. I am here to introduce you to my new podcast that I'm hosting, The Scholarship Roadmap. It features the voices of professional musicians, musician entrepreneurs, and student musicians. This podcast is in support of my music mentorship program for student musicians pursuing careers in music, also named the Scholarship Roadmap. You can find the podcast on all podcasting platforms at thescholarshipRoadmap.com, and you can connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Scholarship Roadmap. Thanks, and I'll talk to you soon.
Is it like 100 degrees today or something like that, or?
It's not quite 100 degrees, but it's pretty up there. It's 94 and pretty ridiculous humidity as well. So yeah, it's nasty outside.
Oh man, I love that part of the country. Though my best friend from high school lives in Annapolis. He's a cellist. His name's Dan Schomper. It's possible you've played with some.
Oh yes, of course I know Dan Schomper. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So my wife and I've come out to visit. Over the years. It's been a few years. I was actually supposed to be in Baltimore for the Maryland MEA, the Music Educators Conference, which got canceled along with everything else in the world. So yeah. I was set for a visit, but hopefully soon. I love that part of the country. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. It's been pretty miserable outside the last few days, but then it calms down some at night.
Okay.
But in fact, I was just in Annapolis last week, and it was pretty hot there, but there was a lovely breeze going on, so that made it really nice out.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I remember a trip, maybe it was late March or early April, and it was like the perfect time to come to DC and just walk. And I think the cherry blossoms were out, and it was just like an absolutely great. It's so funny because we've got cherry trees here. I live in San Francisco now, and the trees are totally confused. They're like blooming in November, and then they lose their leaf, and it's funny. Like it's like the land of perpetual spring. So it's very strange.
Yeah. The issue we have oftentimes out this way is the cherry blossoms will come out, and then we'll get snow.
Yeah.
It's been known to snow in April and then just decimate the cherry blossoms and everything straight away. So it's kind of unpredictable. Yeah. Yeah.
We almost moved to the DC area twice. My
Mm.
wife was a harpist. I mean, she still plays harp, but she ended up going to medical school. But before she did, she got into the finals for the Army band, which I thought
Okay.
it was hilarious. I didn't realize that the Army band employed a harpist, but
Uh-huh.
they do. And but then she was in the finals, but it didn't work out. And then she almost went to Georgetown for medical school. So
Okay.
I've like visited DC thinking that we might end up there a few times, but it seems like there's a lot to it, just that whole area. It seems like there's an awful lot of work for freelance musicians.
There is. I mean, I think that there's been a lot of things sort of in flux over the last decade or so. Certainly after the 2008 or 9 financial crisis, where there's a lot of there's a body of work here. What's tricky about a lot of the freelancing and work in the Washington area is, as you probably know, in San Francisco, it's the traffic.
Yeah.
So you have to really pick and choose what you're going to do based on how long is it going to take you to get there? What are the potential literal roadblocks that there may be? Because I've driven, say, from Baltimore to DC or DC to Baltimore. I've made it from place to place in 45 or 50 minutes. And then on other occasions, it's taken me 3 hours to drive 35 miles. So, you gotta really hope the Beltway gods are on your side.
Yeah, that is no
Yeah.
joke. That DC traffic it's about as bad as it gets. I mean, San Francisco is probably coming in, not too far behind it. But it's incredible that, I lived in Chicago for about 23 years or something like that, and did a lot of I had about 8 years where I was just freelancing, subbing in lyric opera and I had a couple different contracts playing in some different groups, and yeah, like driving into downtown Chicago or out of downtown Chicago, it could be anywhere. Yeah, my last few years, my wife was going to medical school at the University of Chicago, so South Side Chicago, and then I took a job teaching high school orchestra, 35 miles north of Chicago, and so we lived in the Loop, and I had this commute that was like it's like you're describing. It in ideal circumstances it'd be like 45 minutes, but it would easily hit 3 hours on the way home. And I would actually record. I started just recording all the ensembles I worked with every single day, and I would listen back to all the recordings in the car ride home, and I still wouldn't be home yet, which is kind of depressing. You like relive your entire work day, and you're still not back.
Yeah, I that's an interesting one, because I think my favorite contribution to the commuting and listening was once I was going from I think I was driving from DC. This was when I lived in Washington. I was driving from DC to Richmond to sub with the Richmond Symphony. And it was an afternoon, it was a weekday afternoon, it was a weekend afternoon. And I was able to catch the net broadcast of the Fliegende Hollander, the
Dutchman?
The Dutchman.
Yeah,
I was able to catch the live version of Dutchman, and I still had time to get lunch and before I even still made it to Richmond. So that was crazy, and that's no intermission. They did the whole thing down. So
that's hilarious. The one and only time I did Dutchman actually was at Spoleto, and I think didn't you do the Spoleto Festival at some point? Did I see that in your bio?
Yeah, I did. Back in a long time ago. I was there in the early 80s. When we did Ariadne of Naxos one year. And what was that? And then another year we did Fanciulla del West.
Wow.
And I can't, it kind of go a little blank after that, those years. And then I did some other things in the summer. And then I went back again, I think in 90 something. But of course, Badea, Christian, all of those old people were long since gone and everything. So, yeah.
Well, I was curious when you did it. So you were doing it when it was still the Festival of Two Worlds, right? When you were in Spoleto, Italy. Okay, that's cool. I only did the Charleston Festival, and then my wife did that a few years after me. I think I did it maybe 2000, 2001. And then my teacher, Michael Hovnanian, who was one of the Chicago Symphony bassists.
Yeah, yes, Michael we were in the orchestra together.
Oh, what a small world. Oh my goodness. Because I remember him talking to me about it and just telling me all these great stories about, that's great. You were in the orchestra together. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, one of the years that Mike was there, he was playing on a lovely, I think it was a modern instrument, but it was a bass with a lion's head scroll, and it got broken when we got to Italy, and he opened up his bass trunk and the scroll was broken off. And, it was terrible. It was just terrible. But yeah, that was a while ago.
Well, here's a small world story for you. I know that lion's head bass because when I had my bass damaged, Mike loaned that to me, and I brought that to, you'll never believe it, Spoleto.
Oh my God!
That was my bass, and it was funny because he'd been playing on that bass, and he was just having a hard time. I think he got maybe it was principal bass of Victoria or something like that with that bass, and then he finally bought a French bass, I don't know, a better bass. I mean, that's kind of a cool bass, that lion's head bass, but it was definitely like a modern bass, very sort of like straight ahead tone. But yeah, I brought that to Charleston at least, and
isn't that funny? That is crazy. What a small world! What a small world! When we start, you know that you've been around in the business a long time when you can start walking up to people going, I know that bass, that's so-and-so's bass, that's happened a lot. So
I know.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Now, when what years did you do New World? I was just thinking as I was looking at various things you did, like we probably know like 3 dozen people in common. I'm just curious, when were you in New World?
I was in New World in 88.
Okay.
So it had just started. I forget the year that did it start? Did New World begin in 86? I think maybe. At any rate, it was well within the first 3 to 4 seasons that I was there. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I was curious. Because again, thinking of Michael, I remember Michael, he didn't do New World, but he had a lot of friends that were doing New World right around that time, and going in Miami Beach. I subbed in New World a little bit in the late 90s, and it was still in the Lincoln Theater, I think maybe it was that they had. Yeah. So there was a we're going way back in time here, but I'm just curious. So clarinetist, a mutual friend of Michael's and mine named Todd Nico, was in New World but he might have been in like 86 or something. Maybe you two didn't overlap.
I didn't know Todd.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
When I was there, I will tell you that it was very much in the infancy of the sort of revival of South Beach. So most of the hotels and everything from where the Plymouth Hotel was, going all the way down the beach, most of those hotels were derelict buildings, bombed out, just boarded up, everything. And there was only a cafe on Ocean Drive called the Rainbow Cafe. I think that was what it was called. And there was an ice cream shop called The Freeze. And that was pretty much it. That was all that was there. And then there was Joe's, what is it called? Joe's Crab or Joe's Stoneshell Crabs or something like that. and that was sort of the only thing that was on that part of the beach. So it was a totally different scene down there for me.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
That's interesting because by I guess about 10 years later when I was subbing, it had totally turned around, I think. I mean, it
Oh
looks
yeah.
like what I think of when I think of Miami Beach. What an interesting time to be there. Wow.
Yeah, it was a very interesting time. So yeah.
Well, it's like when I was going down, that was when I was living in Chicago, and I remember the first time I subbed was January, and there is nothing like getting on a plane in O'Hare and leaving, and it's like 21 degrees out or something, or worse, and landing in Miami. I remember talking to Mike Valerio was one of the bass players playing at the time. He's out in LA now doing a lot of studio work, but I mean, I just remember standing outside wearing shorts in January, and just it was incredible.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting though because after a certain amount of time, you get acclimated to that too,
Mhm.
and so it could only be 65 degrees, and you start feeling like, oh my God, it's cold outside.
Oh, I relate to that because I'm here in San Francisco and I have become so soft being out here. Like it's always between 50 and 70, and
Yeah.
it's just like this. And I would be so upset with myself if I went back to Chicago, Jason, because I complain about rain now. I never thought I would complain about rain, but it's funny because they report the weather the same everywhere, I think. So like breaking news, here comes the rain. It's going to be a little bit of rain, and my first year I was laughing, and now I bought a puffer coat, which I thought was ridiculous that people wear those in San Francisco, but it's gone that way.
Yeah, it's crazy, but yeah, so that was New World, and was an interesting time to be down there and everything, but it was a great experience working with Michael Tilson Thomas, and of course the people of the orchestra was really really cool. But I think that when I was there, it was very much in its infancy, so I think the program as it is now and how it's developed, I think has become a lot different than what when we were there. Yeah, but I think that's to be expected.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like the community engagement side of things has really come a long way in terms of that. Because I remember, I mean, I just subbed. I was never in it, but I remember talking to people that were in it when I go down or friends. And I just interviewed a woman who just left New World, this year. And she is doing all these community engagement, starting all these programs. She just moved to Austin. And I've talked to several people. It seems like that's become a real mission. I don't know if that was part of it when you were doing it, or because it seems like, I mean, yes, they're training people to take auditions and that kind of thing, but it really seems like from outsider perspective, it looks like they're doing an excellent job of just sort of getting people interested in starting programs in their communities and kind of building up their own thing.
Mm-hmm. We didn't do that. In fact, it was pretty hardcore in terms of just playing lots of music and really on a high level. And in a lot of ways, you ate, you practiced, you played concerts and rehearsals and stuff, and kind of hung out. And that's what we did. So yeah, but I think that those different programs are great skill sets for people to have, yeah, as they progress. So yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Now I'm curious. I know you were in Albuquerque for a little while too. Was that? And by the way, my wife's from Albuquerque, so
Oh,
I've
okay,
spent a
okay.
lot of time in Albuquerque. Was that after New World that you went there?
Actually, that was before
That
New
was before. Okay.
Worlds. Yeah, so I had a gap. I had some gap. Well, I was at Arizona State, and so between Arizona State, I started playing on a section position in Albuquerque,
Mm.
and I would fly over. I would drive over from Tempe to Albuquerque, and so after doing that for a while, then I wanted to come back to the East Coast. My family's all in North Carolina, North and South Carolina. So I kind of wanted to get back home. And I had auditioned for New World previously, and they didn't have an opening or anything. And then I was just sort of in this weird place where I was going to go to Juilliard and study with Homer Minch and everything. I'd worked with him some. And then literally, mom and dad and I had the car basically packed. Next couple of days, heading out to New York, and New World called and said, "We have an opening. Would you like to come?" So I said, "I'm tired of school and I'm going to go to New World." So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I was curious because I saw that you went to Arizona State, and Dan Swain you studied with.
Yes.
And so who I know, I got a chance to spend some time with Dan 2 years ago at the Suzuki convention, and he's such a big. So how did you end up in Arizona? What drew you to ASU?
Lots of money.
Okay, there we go. Nothing wrong with that.
The school gave me lots of money, auditioned and got just lots of financial help from the School of Music to go there. After undergraduate school, North Carolina School of the Arts used to have a program called the International Music Program, where they take an orchestra and you go on tour for several weeks in Europe. And I did that in my senior year at NCSA. And while I was there, I auditioned for the Guildhall School of Music in London, and I got in and everything. My parents had just bought me an instrument that senior year. You know how it's senior year, we need to upgrade your instrument, yada, yep. da, da, da. And so got in there, but then, the price tag for housing in England was just astronomical, and it was just something that was financially not in the reach. And I auditioned for a couple of other universities and things. So I had Arizona kind of in the side pocket, and I, made a decision. I'm going to go here. My teacher from NCSA had worked with Dr. Swain at Brevard Music Center. I was an Eastern Music Festival kid. I didn't go to Brevard, but anyway, my teacher spoke very highly of Dr. Swain, and so I made the decision to go out west and study with him, and it was just one of the most magical times, and really just a great time of learning. The bass and myself and really a different part of the country, to literally go from everything being green and everything of North Carolina, and then Arizona is brown and tans and all of that. But you come to I came to really admire that and love being out there in the Southwest. And like I said, Dr. Swain was just one of the most, I'm trying to think of the word. He was the right thing for me at the right time, the right person to meet my technique and my awareness musically and technically, and then take it to the next level. So I'm very happy that I did that. No questions about. I would have loved to have lived in London. I think it would have been cool to study with the bass teachers there and stuff and experience that. But I'm very happy to have to gone to Arizona State. So
yeah, there is a beauty to the Southwest that is just really special, and I just love. I've spent some time in Arizona, but I've spent much more time in New Mexico, and whether it's northern New Mexico and that enchanted circle and Taos or everything, or I love Albuquerque, frankly, and the Sandia Mountains, and it's a really special place. Last time I was there was the Balloon Fiesta. Maybe 2 years ago or something like that, and it's just that's a really beautiful part of the country for sure.
Yeah, and the balloon, the festival, that's a bucket list item folks should do. I mean, just to see all the balloons take off and everything. It's just amazing. So yeah, I love that, and I love the food of the Southwest,
Oh, yeah.
and New Mexican cuisine is just so good.
Yeah. Is it the El Pinto or some of my favorite? I remember Garduños was big when in Albuquerque when I was there. I think that they've closed, but I mean, I gain a pretty fair amount of weight every time I go visit because it's like that is my favorite food. It's dangerous.
Yeah,
If
it's dangerous. El Patio. I think that
there
was
we
a
go.
restaurant called El
Yeah.
Patio.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, my mother-in-law gets salsa from there and sends that to me sometimes. So that's the place. Yeah.
Yeah. That was probably the first restaurant that the Bay section, Mark Tatum and Jim Sowards. I think we all went there. Some of us after a rehearsal, one of the first times of my going down there, and it was just I was hooked right then and there. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. But the thing that I always remember upon driving my last time, leaving Arizona was just appreciating how vast the sky was or is. You literally almost see from horizon to horizon, no obstructions there. And on the coast where we've got trees and you'd have to go up someplace really high in a building to see that. But you're walking around in Arizona or New Mexico or wherever, and you just see so much sky. That's just so amazing to me. Yeah.
It really is. There's just this majesty to that. My mother-in-law for a couple of years took a job in Gallup, New Mexico, which is off the beaten path would be one, and I remember driving out there from Albuquerque. It was like several hours west of Albuquerque. And we actually drove to Window Rock, Arizona, which is, I think, the capital of the Navajo Nation. I think I'm remembering that right. It's maybe a 20-minute drive north of Gallup. But boy, that is a different part of the country from the coast, either coast.
It is.
For sure.
It really is. It really, really is. So yeah, amazing. So I was very happy to have my time out there. But I was really happy to be back in the DC area, and close to home and everything. So I could get down and see my family very easily from Washington and everything. So.
Well, I was reading about this. You did a fellowship with the National Symphony. Am I remembering this right? And that was when Rostropovich was there, right? So
yes,
I was great.
Yes.
I only got a chance to work with Rostropovich once, but it was a memory I will not forget. I think it was like late '90s or something like that. I was playing in the Civic Orchestra of Chicago, and Rostropovich was conducting the week in Chicago and was conducting Civic, and we did Shasti 5 and 9 maybe or something like that. It was some very Shostakovich heavy program. And I just remember, the thunderous applause. And then he just turns and he's like, "Bossy!" And he just like charges through the orchestra and gives us that like amazing, what was that? That must have been a great time working with him in that group and getting it. Was that right after New World that you went up and did that?
That was after New World. Okay. Yeah. It was incredible. And I don't know that I've actually ever mentioned this to a lot of people, but it was almost, I was so starstruck by all of it. I never will forget going to my first NSO rehearsal, and I'm sitting in the section there, and Rostropovich, and I don't know, we were doing something, Russian, and and the very first note of the orchestra and this wall of sound, that just comes out. I don't even think I could put my bow on the string because I was just so floored, by the whole thing. As corny as it may sound, it was always that kind of experience of just feeling in the presence of something really great, around Rostropovich and his commitment to playing and just this absolute absorption in the music while you were playing. I don't know if you felt that, but you there was no in between under Slava. You were all in, or you just go home for the day. That's just and he brought that out of you in the playing and in the conducting.
Yeah.
So once I kind of got over the starstruckness of it all, just a lot of learning, and he insisted on you being dialed into him. There was no kind of playing with your head in the music stand. He at least of the National Symphony, he was just always look at him, look up and stuff. So I learned to memorize a lot of passages just so you could have your eye on Rostropovich.
Wow.
And it was just magical. There's something about even his sound concept that would seep into your playing. Well, it has to seep into your playing. I mean, you're doing it. And I remember a couple of months after being in the orchestra, or in the fellowship, he walked over to me and Hal Robinson, and I thought, oh God, I'm in trouble, whatever. And in his thick accent, he goes, Alan, he says, you're a very fine bass player, but I need more sound from you. So, and I thought, whew. So I went to the local bow maker. His name is James Kirkendall, and tried out some bows. And then there was a player in the section, Bill Vaughn, who had some Kirkendall bows, and he had a pretty hefty kind of weighted Kirkendall. And so I bought a Kirkendall bow, and I would look up at Rostropovich, and he would go and kind of give you the thumbs up like he could do. So I felt like mission accomplished.
I can't imagine what a cool musical experience to spend that extended period of time with him. I remember just that 1 week in civics so clearly. I remember him sitting down. It was at break, and he sat down and he was talking to the principal cellist, and just sat down and took his cello and started playing. And it's like the entire room went silent, and everyone's just like, what's going on?
Yes.
Just like, what? Yeah, talk about sound concept.
Yes.
That one of those people that I feel like had a profound influence on me, and I had very, very, very minimal. It was just listening to recordings and reading about him, and then that 1 week. What a cool. And then that was when Hal was in National Symphony still, right? So you got a chance to spend time with Hal. That must have been pretty formative.
It was a double whammy. I mean, it really was. It was a double whammy to get, the musical input from Rostropovich and that experience, and then to have that musical and technical and training experience with Hal. It really kind of galvanized. When I look back at my studies and the people that I have worked with, going through the NSO with the people that I did at that time, that really it sealed my studies. You know what I'm saying? I mean, yes, we all continue to study and evolve as artists, but that was the definitive kind of finishing touch on myself as a professional player. I knew then that was a skill set and awareness level that I could take as part of me and make it organic myself and go anywhere in the world and play. And for anybody and play. And it served me well from then until now, and hopefully even beyond now. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, it was so great. Is the colleague that emailed me to get us in touch? It was Patricia is her name, right?
Camilla.
I'm sorry, Camilla. I'm butchering. But that's like my favorite kind of email. I sit down and open my email. I was like, I'd love to chat with Ellen. She had so many great ideas for us to chat with. So one of the things she mentioned was just audition preparation. So so I'm assuming that you've worked with a lot of people, just coaching people to get ready for auditions or taking,
and performances, just general performances. I've also worked with people from the business world who have an important presentation or who have an interview, and they just need to get up and do it a few times and work through that. So. It's become the preparation of performing or getting up to do a thing was something that was very important for me. Um, and I will say that in spite of the completeness of working with Hal and working with Rostropovich, when for me there was a part of my growth, especially when it came to audition and high level performing, that I needed to go into myself. I had done the working with professionals and teachers and whatnot. But there were times when I didn't feel I performed auditions as well as I could, or recitals or whatever. And it was almost as if I felt that it was something that as a young musician, a young performer, almost it's unteachable, that skill set of knowing my personal disposition, of my nerves, of different things. So it was at that point that I realized I needed to take a step and into my own personal development when it came to how do we do this engage in this process, the audition, that is such a pressurized experience, and do it well enough to be considered for a job. That wasn't something that necessarily, even though I had worked with so many great people, there's no necessarily a system. There's no recipe. You do this, you practice, you play for people, blah blah blah, and then you go and then hope for the outcome to be what you wish it to be. So I had to do a lot of investing in myself, and I would say that the first kickoff to that was, in spite of reading things like Barry Green's book, the Inner Game of Tennis, and some other things. The one thing that kind of tipped me off was one of the years, it being the Summer Olympics. I can't remember which year it was, but as I sat and I watched it, I started to draw this connection between, oh my gosh, here are these incredible athletes doing this thing that they have practiced and worked for since the last 4 years or the last time, and how do they do that? How do they do their 4 minute or 30-second or whatever their routine, or in the deed of a runner, 9 point whatever seconds? How do you do that under such pressure and do it well? And so it was from that point that I delved into reading some, not a lot, but just reading a couple of books about sports psychology, about training, and about learning how the individual functions under that kind of pressure. So flight or fight responses, those kinds of things. And from that point, I was able to bring together a method that worked for me. And that method helped me as I grew into it, from auditions becoming a frightful experience or a dreaded experience. Not that I think anybody loves doing it, but became something that I was able to, I was and I am able to do in a focused manner, and I feel in a manner that's representative of how I play any given day under any set of circumstances, right? So we all have had that experience where we go in and say, gosh, I practiced this so much, I couldn't call it out when it didn't come out like I thought I could when I got there. In short measure, that's what I'm trying to say. So getting to that point where we do it. Mm-hmm. And if just one more thing, if I can say, upon working with Camila and with other people, the one thing I always like to say when we do our interview before we even touch instrument is nothing I ever say to them is anything that they've not heard before. I just put it into a workable method, and so it's no secret. There's no grail of it. It's just, put it together in this methodology so that we know how to practice in a measured way to achieve what we're trying to do at the end of that process, whether it's a recital or a concerto or an audition or speaking before a keynote, being the keynote speaker at a corporate gathering of 450 people. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting, the parallels between taking an audition and being an Olympic athlete. There are so many parallels, and people like Don Green, who I know has spent a lot of time over the years at New World, although I think he came there after you left. And then it's also interesting to think about how that might have similarities to doing a keynote speech or something like that. That's interesting. I hadn't been doing I during my freelance career in Chicago, the last maybe 5-6 years, I'd given up on auditions. I wasn't even thinking about that, and I'm still not taking auditions these days in San Francisco. But moving out here, a lot of the people around me are, and I've been participating in kind of what you're describing a little bit more. There's a wonderful violinist in the San Francisco Symphony named Catherine, and of course I'm blanking on her last name now, but she's somebody that everybody loves to go and play for before they get ready for an audition. She's just got great feedback, and I've been getting together with some violinists and bassists and cellists, and just and again, it's nothing that maybe they haven't heard before, but just getting up there and airing out the nerves and hearing from somebody with a different perspective. I remember playing for a bass trombonist back in Chicago when I was getting ready for an audition. So that was some of the most helpful comments I got. It was like, well, I couldn't hear any of the pitches. And I remember thinking like, oh, that's true. One probably should be able to hear the pitches, and similar comments maybe with violinists. And so it's really cool to lift each other up like that. It's part of what we do. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I realized, we most of us watch the Olympics. I mean, how can you not? I mean, we know so many people from the Olympics, but in that period of time, when I was auditioning, I would say that it was a low point for me when I was a younger person because I wasn't getting the outcomes that I wanted, and that didn't have anything to do with the teacher or this or that. It was how I was able to perform under that pressure in that situation. And what I realized, as I watched this Summer Olympics, I don't know if that was 98 or 96, I'm not sure when it was, but what I realized is how we as classical musicians, again, let's go back to that time. And so we didn't necessarily have people coming to you in New World and talking about these things or whatever. But my point is that we musicians are tasked or asked to do something that's highly pressurized, exhibit a skill set under a highly pressurized situation. And yet we didn't have the training to do that, right? And that's not a slam against anybody in the business that's come before me. It's just our awareness of that. And it also has to do with the fact that I think the technical abilities have expanded. I think that the technical requirements and expectations have expanded. There is no orchestra, there's no instrument in the orchestra body that is not playing probably at some of the highest technical levels in the whole evolution of the instrument of that, right? I mean, that's just my opinion, but that's the way I feel. And so we're asked to do something that maybe 50 years ago or whatever, it just wouldn't have occurred to someone. So my question was, how do I bridge that gap? If I've got to go on this diving board and do a triple whatever, Ein Heldenleben lick, I need to know how to do that. And it's got to be more to it than just getting up or having a good day or, all of these other things that we would say, this is how you do it. There's more to it than just that. So I had to break it down and go into this incredibly methodical method of not only the physical practice on the instrument, but the mental practice and everything, and lots of journaling, lots and lots and lots of journaling and writing about what I was feeling, but also a lot of positively critical analysis of this tone can be better. This passage can be better. How? Well, look at it right here. Listen to it. There it is. So it's a very methodical thing that I felt that now I understand that. And it's not just a matter of just, oh, well, hopefully if I have a good day, I may do well. No, we're going to have a good day and you're going to make it that way. That's just the way it's going to be.
Wow, that's really interesting that you were doing that much journaling too. I think that's very cool. I've been going through. It's actually right here next to me. I've been going through this. A woman named Susanna Klein sent me this really cool method called Practisma, and it's something she's been using with her students. She teaches at Virginia Commonwealth, I think.
Yes, in Richmond.
And so it's been really interesting. It's been fun for me. It's a 16-week thing just designed to kind of get you thinking a little more insightfully and deeply about your playing. And it's something that I wish I had in school or when I was taking auditions or whatever. So I've been doing a lot more journaling than I ever have, which I was resistant to. I thought I don't want to write about my practicing, but it has been really interesting and kind of, it kind of like reinforce or setting it on paper has made me more likely to do it or something. I don't know. How did the journaling, I just love how people work. Were you, as you started to realize, I need to move ahead in this, were you starting to record yourself more and then write about what you were hearing in the recording, or how were you journaling every day? Just how did that process look for you?
Well, I would say yes to a little bit of all of that.
Okay.
Recording various things, it wasn't consistent. Journaling wasn't necessarily consistent back in that time. But I think around about the latter part of my junior year at North Carolina School of the Arts, and certainly into my senior year, I don't know. It was just at some point, I think I was preparing for junior recital or something, and I had been recording myself and listening, and I just started writing notes, just one sentence, da, 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 da. And then as I kept on, I just kept doing that same thing. But I would say that really once I got to Arizona State, I felt that as school, as university, being my career, if you will. I mean, you're a student, but we're in our student career. That when I went into Dr. Swaim's studio and of course left the studio, I didn't record my lessons with him. And somehow or another, having already sort of done sporadic journaling, I would just leave my lessons or my coachings or rep class, and I just find a place in the quad or whatnot. And I just started writing down everything that we talked about in lesson. Here's spiccato. This is how you do it. This is da 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 da. And ever since then, I jotted down everything from those lessons that I worked with Dr. Swaim. Lessons every time I worked with, Homer Minch or Jack Boudreau or whomever, I would just recap the whole lesson by writing it down. And you're absolutely correct by saying that when you can write, what I realized at that point in Arizona is when I can write this down myself and just put it back on the page, then I have learned it. I know it. I know it inside. I don't need to have the teacher tell me it again because I've already absorbed it. And the expression or metaphor that I like to use for that is, making the connection or closing the loop. When you can commit it to paper, something that you have learned, then you close the loop. It's sealed. You've made that connection. And that's how I did that. That's how I started doing it. That's when I started doing it. And I have lesson journals from all the time in NSO and Hal and Rostropovich and just so many things that go back, in addition to my own recital work and audition work and everything. So, yeah.
Wow. No, that's great. I just had a conversation last week with Jason Haheim, who is the timpanist for one of the timpanists for the Met Orchestra, and he was what you're describing. That's what he would do when he would go take lessons, and he would basically recap the lesson, just writing down in as much detail as possible. He was a neuroscientist, didn't even go to music school, and through just deliberate practice and just working on things over, I think he took 28 auditions, and now he's in the Met. It's a remarkable story, but he credits it all to that really deliberate, doing the hard work, doing the...
You have to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you another thing that built on my journaling is, Dr. Swain would always say, well, if you can record yourself, not if you can record, he would say, when you record yourself practicing. And of course, in those days, it was still by tape, record yourself practicing. He would always say, you can pretty much teach yourself because you can hear what you just played. So you're correcting yourself. You don't need to come to the lesson to get corrections. You come to the lessons to exhibit what you've learned and what you've practiced, not for somebody to go, oh, you need to play F sharp there, or oops, that's out of tune. So that was part of my goal, pretty much from the first lesson I ever had with Dr. Swain was, okay, I'm here to teach myself. And this person here is to guide me through that learning process. So I'm not going to say that I did it every week. I'm not going to, that would just not be true. But his point was, when you can sit back and listen to what you're doing, you begin to teach yourself. You begin to know it. You know these things. And just as a metaphor and a tangent, I will say to someone, if we're playing or I'm giving a lesson, and I'll say, well, your bow is, leaning this way or that way. And they'll go, am I doing it this way? Did I do it right after you come back next week? And I'll go, well, I don't know. Did you look in the mirror? Did you record yourself on your telephone? Well, no. And then I go, well, then do it and you'll see. And the other metaphor that I love to use is, can you give yourself a shave on the face without looking in the mirror? And without cutting your head off, or without being bloody mess, or for a woman, can you put on your whole makeup and if you wear makeup, if they were, but can you do the point is can you do any of that stuff with seeing from the inside out without having to look in the reflection of your mirror? It's a very strong but simple thing to do. But when you can do that, you learn how to do things by feel, by touch, and in the bass playing, when it doesn't feel right, when something's off kilter versus somebody having to tell you. And so you make that own realization yourself, and you cement it within yourself. And anybody who wants to correct that, we all need a little correction. No. Okay, great. But not reinforcing again and again, whatever. So that's where those, that kind of journaling and writing and teaching oneself comes from. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. This is one of my favorite topics. I just am fascinated by like how, people who find ways to continue to improve. It doesn't matter what age you are, it doesn't matter where you are in life. There's a friend of mine, he's been on the podcast before, named Mark Gelfo. He's a French horn player who created a practicing app that's designed for deliberate practice. It's called Modacity. And the whole app is designed to get you to record yourself. And the reasoning behind it is that what we don't want to be doing is analyzing ourselves as we're playing. We want to separate the performance from, we need to be analyzing ourselves and looking back, just like an athlete would watch back. But watch footage. But part of what torpedoes us in pressure situations is that we're like analyzing ourselves as we're going. And so making recording just a part of your everyday thing, even though it can be brutal to look at that crooked bow or to hear that out of tune note, I think that's a good way to separate that. Now I'm performing, now I'm analyzing versus trying to analyze in the moment. I think that's what contributes to so much in terms of nerves and instability in playing.
Well, absolutely. You have to quiet that left brain. The critical analysis, analytical side has to be quieted at that point when the creative side needs to take control. So absolutely. And yes, the observational left side brain can make comments as we're performing, but it can never be in full control in the driver's seat at an event, at a performance. It will choke, or we run the risk of choking if we are commenting real time on what we're doing. And in a lot of ways, we're not trusting ourselves if we're making those comments. So there's a lot of self-trust that goes on there, of letting go of the steering wheel and being very sure that I got this. Everything I've prepared, it's going to come out. I can let it flow. And my job is to let the creative part, the right side brain, be in the driver's seat, if you will, at this point. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One of the things I'd like to say about journaling, at a time, I think, just going back and just being frustrated and depressed and just down, about auditions and just things. A friend of mine gave me a wonderful book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
That's a great book.
It is. Yeah. And anybody who's ever done The Artist's Way or familiar, that the first thing she says is you do this journaling 3 pages in the morning. And stream of consciousness, just get up, blah, 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 write your 3 pages, go, off you go. That's it. And so I would say probably back in still the 90s, I worked through the Artist's Way book and really embraced this journaling. And it already built on journaling that I was doing. So it was very, very interesting to keep doing it because you find out so much when you do that, Mm-hmm. And so journaling is, apart from taking little breaks, 5 months here, 6 months there, journaling has probably been a part of my life or whatever since the mid 90s all the way up until now. So
that's so cool.
And that's Julia Cameron. That's all the work of doing the Artist's Way. I have probably worked through the Artist's Way book. I've done the book about 6 times now over the years, because you go through it and you have so many different realizations and things from of life growth, that's helped me with journaling and everything too. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's something that I go in and out of phases of journaling, and I don't know why it leaves my life. I always feel better when I am doing it. I've finally, the last few weeks, it's been tough in the pandemic. It's been particularly tough. Like I've struggled with like being consistent with that, but I always feel like my life has a little bit more direction when I'm doing that, or I'm, that self-reflection, whether it's about my life in general or certainly about music or anything I'm endeavoring to do. It seems to really help.
Yeah. To add to that, I saw a bumper sticker a couple of years in Baltimore here, and it said, "Don't believe everything you think." And I just think that's brilliant. And so a lot of times if I'm thinking about something and I write it down, I won't act on something or whatever until I write it down and I can read it back to myself. And then I go, oh, okay, step away from the ledge, Alan, oh, sure, go with it,
Yeah.
But yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, kind of switching gears, something else that Camila suggested that we should chat about is diversity in classical music, which I'd love your thoughts. Anything you want to share would be your experiences or anything you want to share.
Sure. So my thoughts about diversity and inclusion. Um, I will say, let's go back a little bit to the whole beginning. And I would say that first and foremost, I would say, sorry,
No.
I would say that classical music found me. I would say it that way, and not that I found it. And by that, I mean that my voice is in classical music. Um, I remember even as a little boy, my brother and I would go to our grandparents' house, and I don't know. At one point, I discovered that my grandparents liked jazz. I don't come from a family of musicians, but I found all of these incredible Ray Brown albums one time in a stack of music at my grandparents' house. And I started listening, and I would try to fool around on the double bass, as Ray Brown was, doing his walking thing. Um, and that was great. It didn't stick, and I never will forget. My dad worked for a German company, here in America, but it was a German company, and uh, they knew my dad was through talking to his work colleagues or whatever. They knew that I had just begun playing piano or whatnot, and they invited us to come to a recital of one of his boss's daughter. She's an organist, and I went, and it was something else. There was something about that organ recital that just went whoop, and that was it. And I knew right then and there that perhaps I wouldn't be a keyboardist, but I was playing piano and I was playing bass at the same time. That's where it found me. Classical music found me. My voice was not going to be that of jazz. It was going to be in this genre of classical music. And so, as a young person, I didn't even think about diversity or this or that or lack thereof. You just go to summer camps and you play in youth orchestra and you do all these little things. I didn't know,
Yeah.
whatever. And then we fast forward, and then of course, we grow and we become adults and whatnot. So my thoughts. It's such a huge conversation, Jason.
Right.
Um, I think about there's a wonderful documentary about Nina Simone that's on Netflix. I watched it a couple of years ago, and where through no choosing of her own, someone at the Curtis Institute of Music told her and her teacher that she'd be better off as a jazz player than she would be as a classical player. And whether I don't think the talent was a question, I think it was that person's view, probably of saying, well, there's no context for a Black female concert pianist yet in America. And so I can only think that that person failed Miss Simone at that point. She didn't fail herself. Indeed, she may not have even asked for this gift of music to be bestowed within her. So we must think, I think, about what are we failing people? Are we helping people? And who's holding the keys to the kingdom when we think of inclusion, diversity? Who's failing and or holding the keys to the kingdom towards other people if we allow some in but make our own decision that, well, you do this and you don't do that. We cut off a person's spiritual path, or we're going to nurture that spiritual path. And so I think that we've got a lot of work to do in this area in the world, and in the classical music world. And I think that I read the two big articles that came out recently in the New York Times about opera, music and opera, and diversity or lack thereof. And then there was one about orchestras and stuff. And I understand through some colleagues, through Camilla, that on Slip Disc or something, there was a counter discussion about this, of how the screen and all of this is, this perfect situation or thing for choosing people. And I can only think that if we don't, if the body of people within this industry of classical music don't see the need to have diversity and inclusion, then we've got some serious work to do, because a screen can't make that. If we don't trust ourselves to make a choice about bringing people in, then that's a trust issue amongst human beings. That's not something that a screen can or even should decide, right? And we would also say, I would say, it's not because there's not numbers of incredible people of color and stripes out here that happen to be classical musicians. It's not because they're not there. So I think we have to ask ourselves, is the screen and is the blind process, is that failing people or is it helping people? And so that would be my first question. And then I would also ask us to be a lot more genuine and real with ourselves. How can we possibly ask people to support our art and ask diverse people to support our art when our organizations don't represent the communities that we're trying to service? I think it's naive to think that we can have it both ways. You can't. You just cannot. And I think also, and I've written about this myself, how is it that just about other corporate entity in business, how is it that they can have some form of diversity and the arts feel that we are somehow excused from that diversity and inclusion? That wouldn't be sincere of us to say that, because if it did, then that would seem to me to say, well, then you're shirking your responsibility economically, socially, spiritually, all of those things. And I go back and tell the little story about jazz or whatnot, and those things, because I feel I chose the music chose me, not the other way around. And so therefore, I can't, I'm only a performer. This is what I do. So somebody has to respond in kind on the other side of that table from me to open their ears and their possibilities to go, wow, this is a talent. That's a talent. Bring that talent on board. Mm-hmm. That's my point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, there's no question that artistic excellence would be denied or somehow would falter. But I think another thing, and I spoke with Camilla and I have spoken about these things sometimes at length, and I think what we have in our business is we know that there's a finite number of positions that are out there that are in orchestras that meet our core survival needs. So we're not out, driving and freelancing like most of us do in Perseverance. So we know that. So there's a scarcity mentality, I think, of us. There is within some of us, there is a competitiveness that's there also. Unfortunately, there are people that have those implicit biases that, this is not the form of art that is for those kinds of people, or whatever whatever those things are. So I think we have to have that discussion versus just opening up the doors and making this multicolored orchestra, and we're all going to be happy and run off into the sunset. That's just not the way that it's going to work. And the last thing I want to say about this is this. The screen, when I was a young man, the screen had just become a thing. The blind audition process had just become a thing out of lack of women and some lawsuit, all the inroads that make it so. My thing, Jason, as I've grown older, is that if we're going to change and evolve a culture of an organization, I want to say, wouldn't it be better to do that from the inside out than the outside in? I think of the blind audition, screened process, whatever, as being a solution that is from the outside in versus changing the culture of people in power, in orchestras, in arts organizations, in the corporate world, addressing and raising awareness of individuals inside the organization. Therefore, you change, you raise the awareness from within. And then what happens as it identifies out to your representation to where the public is, you possibly will have a inclusive, diverse entity of which organization for where people work, right? So that's what I think, because then I could ask women, and I do, is there sexism in classical music? And they go, you damn well bet there is. Is there race? Are there race issues, or let's just say implicit biases within the class? Absolutely. So what has the screen really done? What does it do if we've still got these issues when the original mandate said, we're going to start doing blind auditions because we need to achieve X, Y, or Z? Well, if we're still working with those, if we still have these things that are prevalent within a decision-making body within the organization, then we've only put a Band-Aid over the real issue. So we've got a lot more conscience raising and changing within the organizations, whether that's by coaching and classes or a mandatory thing where people have to sign on to learn what is implicit and explicit biases and things of that nature. You have to train that in. So that's where I feel that it is. And I applaud the work of Sphinx, and I applaud the work of other organizations that are putting people out there, because they are substantiating the fact that there's immense talent, incredible talent that deserves to have a voice within the whole system of letting that next little person out there go, I want to be a bass player, I want to be this. And yet, they may be the only one, like I was in my neighborhood, that did that went forward. So I think it's very important to do.
Well, it's incredible. Well, thank you for sharing. And it's incredible the work that Sphinx has done. And I've chatted with a lot of people who've been involved. Actually, one of the last people I saw before the pandemic broke out was Xavier Foley, who Sphinx, I think, flew back. He came out to do a recital here in San Francisco. And man, you want to talk about a talent just this. I think he's maybe 25, maybe 26 or something like that. And just, I've been obsessed. I mean, one of the pieces I'm working on for whenever I do a performance again is his Irish Fantasy. So another something that we have share in common is just freelancing in general, that freelancing life. And I remember back to about maybe 5 years ago, I was talking to Douglas Mapp, who I'm not sure how much your paths have crossed. He's based up more in Philadelphia area, teaches at Rowan and does the road warrior kind of life, like in that, especially like New Jersey, Pennsylvania. And I remember when I was full-time freelancing, probably 7-8 years, and I had a period of time when I was playing in a chamber orchestra in Memphis. the Iris Orchestra, and occasionally the Memphis Symphony. I was also playing in Milwaukee and living in Chicago. And I would have these evening concerts in Memphis, Saturday night. I'd have an 11 a.m. day starting and a double in Milwaukee. And I realized if I get in the car after the concert in Memphis, I could drive and just make it. If I drove all night, I could just make it to Milwaukee for my double and then drive home. And I think I took 6 months off of my life every time I did one of those. But how it did, well, first of all, maybe did you expect to be doing the kind of work that you've been doing these last couple decades? Like if we go back to either New World or New Mexico Symphony or at any point there, or when you're playing with National Symphony, did you see this, what the portfolio career, I guess, you've assembled for yourself with the various work? Was that something that you were sort of seeing as a possible future for you?
Right. Was it something I was seeing? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I was certainly, and even now, it still is my aspiration that I would be in a symphony orchestra full time. There was nothing to suggest that I wouldn't, or indeed we wouldn't. I mean, we have the best information and hopes that we have at that time that we're doing it. So no, I didn't think, and I don't look down on anyone that's a freelancer and never did. But my aspiration that I would be in an orchestra. Yeah, sure. I thought that would have been a conclusion that would have been settled a long, long time ago. Right. And I think that's part of, when I start talking about the artist way and the retooling of how I go audition and all of that, we're seeking always, what can I do that's going to get me over that ledge, get me over that hump, and make it open that door. So there's a lot of investment that we do in ourselves, that personal investment. And it's always been towards, okay, well, this is what I do, this is going to be the thing that takes me to that level of what I'm seeking, what I want as a full-time orchestra job. So I at this point, I'm principal in Williamsburg Symphony. I'm principal in Roanoke Symphony, and there are times, I make the most of it. I make the most of it and try to create a section atmosphere where it is as real to us as a section as it would be what I experienced in the National Symphony. Because we don't know if there's ever going to be, if any of us are going to go to that next level, right? So let's make it as real as we can. And so that brings me fulfillment. Otherwise, I think I would be pretty depressed. You know what I'm saying? If because a lot of us are freelancers, not because we chose to be, but just because your number it didn't come up, or a variety of reasons. Life takes place in things, relationships, sicknesses, and death, and so many different things happen that it signifies, like life is still going, and it doesn't care about you're taking an audition or whatever. It happens around you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that you work to kind of have that vibe in the section, that bass player family maybe vibe. We call it. If I look right over there, I can see the photo of me with the Elgin Symphony bass section, and that was my family. I did that. It's a Ropa gig, 8 weeks of classics and a few weeks of pops. There's a similar setup, but that was my family. I was in that orchestra for 16 years. That's the longest I've ever done anything in my life. And Tim Schaefer, the principal in that group, I mean, that became my family. And it's interesting because I didn't intend to freelance. I think just like you're saying, many people don't. I started to realize some of the positives in some ways. One is that I was sort of bulletproof employment wise. otherwise, unless a global pandemic came and swept everything away, which I guess that can happen. But just realizing I had so many irons in the fire that if one fire were to go out, I had other things. But that is tough. That sort of, and I've not done as much freelancing out here in the Bay Area, kind of intentionally, just working on some other things, but it can be so easy to be sort of driftless. Like there was even a documentary shot here in the Bay Area called The Freeway Philharmonic, maybe shot 15 years ago or so.
Oh yeah, I think I saw something about that. Yeah,
it's a fascinating. You can see it on PBS if you go and log into any PBS app. You can find it, and it's interesting. It's actually a really interesting documentary because it's more geared towards the audience and like sort of explaining what we do as freelance, like what our life is like, which is really interesting. Because if you think about how many times you talk to a patron and they're sort of confused, maybe they think this is your full-time job, or maybe they think you're a volunteer, or maybe they just don't understand, what's behind the curtain. So that documentary is a really cool look. But I mean, the Bay Area, they name the name of the documentary Freeway Philharmonic, it's describing these musicians. So certainly there are a lot of people driving to Santa Rosa, driving to San Jose. The weather is maybe a little nicer than DC or Chicago or some places, but it's a very similar kind of life. And it's so easy to feel kind of on board when you're doing that. At least my perspective, chatting with people. But some people find their friends and their family in those organizations, and but it can be tough for sure. That isolation, or at least me, I always had struggled with feeling a little bit like trying to, like a little bit, adrift.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah. I mean, I think when we're in our 20s something, it's a lot of fun. It can be fun. And certainly if we're single, it can be fun. You're not leaving, you're not leaving people at home and animals and things like that, But I think as we get older, it gets to be a bit much. And the other thing that I think suffers is the quality of the music. It's hard to drive for 4 or 5 hours, be really focused on what you're doing so you don't drive off the road, and then sit down for a rehearsal. Again, I'm not bemoaning that, but I'm saying you really do have to think about that, driving, and then, okay, now I'm going to sit down and I've got 3 more hours to be very, very focused on doing this. I think we get used to it, and quite frankly, I think we as musicians, I think we can really rise to the occasion, but sometimes just because we can do it doesn't mean that we should. And I've known lots of players who are just like, they're freelancers and I have a zone. They have a zone. I will not work 2 hours outside of my zone or an hour and a half outside of my zone. And I really respect those people, for doing that. And they are well aware that then they're going to have to backfill with teaching and church gigs and day jobs and all sorts of stuff to make it happen. But I think that if that's what you set up for your life, I think that's a good thing. And I've often thought about those types of scenarios for myself as well. But I just am where I am right now in terms of my jobs and what I do. But I think most people, if you said, would you like to have an orchestra job that met our core survival needs in a stationary place? Most people would go, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. And what I think also is interesting, Jason, is I saw an article this morning in the New York Times. I didn't get to read it, but I'm paraphrasing. It said something about cobbling together work is good, except for when a pandemic comes, and then it talks about the other side of that or something, and it's talking about the gig economy. You and I and hundreds of other musicians, we know all about the gig economy. And
they named it after us. They named it after what we do.
That's right. That's exactly right. And the thing about it is that there really are only so many hours in a day. Like you said, you were in X state and you finished at 1 hour of the night and you drove to another. Well, we don't have the bandwidth to do that many more things. And so I think if we talk about gig culture in the larger sense now, as it comes to the population, this is a big political thing that we're confronted with right now, because I think a lot of companies and corporations would love to have nothing more than the overhead that comes with a stable workforce. But at what cost is it to the individual when there's only so many 4-hour part-time jobs one can do literally in a day? We can't add more hours there. There's only 24 hours. So I think that orchestras and I think that the arts have to realize that we artists invest so much in ourselves that there is a need for us to be able to have something that meets our core survival needs. And I don't think that, well, I can safely say for myself and probably thousands of other people, we don't do this to get rich, and we never will be compensated ever for the amount of time and money and emotional capital that we put into being artists of whatever stripe. But that's not what we do it for. But we do have to have, however, there is a level that has to be met at some point. Otherwise, then the music or the art is going to suffer. My philosophy is that if the core being is not healthy in so many ways, it's going to only be a matter of time before that unhealthiness is going to manifest itself in our craft.
How have things been for you the last few months? Just, like this pandemic, this stinks for everybody. Like nobody expected that we would be in this. And certainly like the remove, like we're, it's like, what do? We do everything that they're telling us not to do, right? We get together close as a group in a big hall with lots of people and have this beautiful social, durational experience. So like, how have you been faring, just like psychologically or otherwise, like the last, several months?
How have I been faring? Well, I would say unemployment is a good thing,
yeah.
and it's a necessary thing. My husband is not a musician. He works for a company, and they most of them work remotely anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So his work is literally not stopped. So knock on wood for that. That sustains us. I've done an awful lot of house projects.
Me too.
Yeah, caulk that window, fix that, paint that post. I've done a lot of that. Clean out that basement. I've done a lot of those things. I've done some practicing. It's been good to be away from the bass a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think to just go back quickly, all the driving, all the we're doing all of this performing and everything under the lens of driving and this and traffic. And so it's been really good to just kind of be at home and step back from things and be able to miss it. So I miss it now. So now I've been, last month I picked back up the bass and because I missed it, but I needed that time away. I needed that little bit of, okay, and what I find is interesting is that so many things work out when I step away and I come back and I go, oh, I can do that now. I couldn't do that before. So it's always still happening. The creative process is always still going on, I think, in my brain, in our brains, even when we're away from the instrument. So it's been really, really good. And it's just been good to kind of slow down life, just pull back, spend a lot more time at home, quality time with people, even if we're on the telephone or FaceTiming or whatever. It's been a really good time I would say we've been thriving. We've been really thriving in this atmosphere. even though we have days where it's just like, I'm just, it hits us or hits me, or the next few days it might hit Andrew. It's just like, oh my God, can we go do this? Or no, we can't. But so, we have that downtime, but then we bounce back. But overall, personally, it's been manageable. I'm
Mhm.
going to say that.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's been and I think it's been and I think the biggest part about it is that we've been adaptable, and that's what's made it that way. Nothing that we've been asked to do has been for a punitive measure, but to keep us all healthy and safe. And I think by being able to adapt to that and understand, that makes it so much easier to go through a time like this.
Yeah. Yeah. I try to keep that in mind. I have a similar situation. My wife has a job that continues on, unaffected relatively so. But Alan, I've been staring out this window for the last 5 months, and we moved right before the pandemic hit, and there was not one plant outside of this window. We got this balcony garden, and now I have full giant tomato plants covered in tomatoes. I got all this. And so it feels like Groundhog Day for sure. And I also had the same thing. It's like, wow, what should I practice? Do I practice? What do I do? Do I do that? And I quit doing everything for a while. And then finally I was like, well, I guess this is not ending anytime soon. So I sort of cleared out some mental stuff on the bass and came back to it. And it's been a good time for us. We're very social people, and we live right in the middle of San Francisco. And so going out is like what we do, and so go to bars and music and food and all that's gone, right? We're as shut down as we were in March. So it's been tough, just in terms of that, but people have it. Obviously, I feel very fortunate, but we do go a little stir crazy, but we also feel lucky, and it has been a good time. And like you said, lots of things have gotten done around the house that would not have gotten done otherwise.
So your wife is not on the front lines of the medical.
She's academic radiology, so that continues unaffected, and she's actually started to play more harp, which is kind of interesting. She probably went a decade with that, barely touching the instrument, and she's kind of come back to that. And so it's been fun hearing the harp come from the other part of the place, and it's been great.
Isn't it interesting how we can have this love? I don't want to say hate, because that's not the right, but we have this love. It's a trying relationship sometimes with these instruments and with these crafts that we do, and we can, and there's a season to our infatuation with the craft and with the instrument, and then there's time where I find myself, I just want to step back and listen and just absorb before I get back into actively doing it,
Yeah.
And in that space, we refill ourselves, our spirit, so that we can get back and go, okay, now I love it again,
Yeah. Well, we're artists. I mean, that's how we are, right? Yeah. We have different seasons for different things. I love that word.
Yeah, I do. I really, really do. I think, one of the things that I learned from Julia Cameron is that, we can sometimes be so involved with doing our craft, doing our art, that we think that spring of creativity just goes on forever and ever and ever. And it doesn't. We need to have that time where we stop and where we go away, or if we can afford that, or we do things where we just get away from it, so we come back, so that we're not, nasty people when we get back on stage. Because I think a lot of what we see can be burnout, just plain old-fashioned burnout, versus just grouchy and complaining people, just needing to get away from it, just for a little while.
Yeah. Well, it's so easy to burn out, especially like you said. It's one thing when you're 22 and you don't really have anything else going on, but then that very real thing of working when your loved ones are off, right? I noticed that so much with my wife. It's like, when I sub in San Francisco Symphony, it's like, now I leave and you're getting home, and that's, at least the rehearsals are during the day, but for a lot of the freelance work, of course, it'd be in the evening, and it's so, and then when you're doing gig work, there's that pressure, at least that many people, or most probably, feel that pressure to take as much as you can, just to because you have the season where it rains and where it doesn't. And I remember back when I was freelancing in Chicago, I'd think, wow, I haven't had a day off in like 94 days, teaching lessons on Sundays, before the matinee, Saturday mornings at the local music school. And even though, it's music and music's fun, but that there is a very real burnout to that with the driving and that you just, I could feel that flame kind of going out,
Ooh, yeah,
right?
yeah. It's funny. With me, I mean, I could do that. I could do those stretches. And we, as you said, we have to do that sometimes. But I don't know, somehow or another, I'm able to, I can put that bass in the corner. And when I do it, I think this is the thing. I was just talking to a bass colleague of mine last week. And when I'm doing it, when I'm engaged, when I'm working on the bass in the orchestra, I try my level best to give 100% every single time I engage, every single time. But for that, when I'm done, I'm done.
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
I'm done. I do it and then I'm done. I need that mental space. I need that emotional space. I need that physical space. I don't have to do the music thing and texting and rehearsal and, God forbid, but just sort of, I'm here, but I'm not here. And, never committing. I commit. I'm all in.
Yeah.
And then when the season is done, I need that month or whatever, a little bit of time to just go, okay. Because I know that when I get back on, I'm going to be all in,
Mm-hmm.
again. And that works for me. That life works for me. And I like that. But yeah.
Well, that's something that I've realized, even as we've gotten into this age of texting and always on with devices, there's something kind of beautiful. And that phone, I put that on silent mode or turn it off for rehearsal. There's something kind of amazing about taking a couple hours in a rehearsal or certainly in a concert and just being engaged in that one activity. I mean, how often does that happen in most people's lives? And it's just kind of it's a cool thing to be in a group of 80 other people who are focused on one thing, that's just such a cool, an amazing human experience. And I think I've sort of realized in more recent years how precious that really is. And especially now that it's disappeared for a duration, I can't wait. Can you imagine? I can't wait for that first rehearsal or certainly that first concert. Boy, did I take concerts for granted. I didn't think I was doing that, but that's something that this pandemic has taught me for sure.
Yeah. I think so. In fact, I think the thing that the pandemic has taught me is the level of distraction, whether it is from devices or from this, we gotta go
Yeah.
here, we gotta go there. I'll give you an example. Early on in the pandemic in Baltimore, when it started to get warm, I saw more people walking daily in the neighborhood. I heard more kids playing in the backyard on swing sets and this and that. When, during normal times, parents were shuttling those kids to this soccer and that. And I was like, oh, this is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be playing in the backyard and sitting on the front porch and walking around the neighborhood. And that was such a beautiful, and it just let me know, gosh, how we get ourselves wound up into a pace, and we would consider that to be a normal pace, and to have this time of disruption from it has been a really incredible thing. I mean, it really has shown me, at one point, honestly, I have not driven to Washington, D.C. in months. That's something really incredible. To think I've not been on 95 in I don't know when.
I know.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I don't know what I'm going to do the next time I have to get on the Beltway.
Yeah, no, I thought the exact same thing. Yeah, it makes me wonder, like, how I'm sure I'll think differently about as I start to say yes to certain things that come in that maybe I did, because, like, yeah, it's been interesting. I've barely left my neighborhood. It's crazy. I walked south of Broadway the other day, which is only like not like a half a mile from here. I thought, wow, the last time I was south of Broadway in San Francisco was like late March or something like that. So it's been very weird when I think back, like even 6 months ago, like I hop on a plane for whatever, and or get in the car, and so yeah, it's been an interesting reset for sure. I'll tell you
Yeah.
that's another thing. What we were talking about with rehearsals and concerts and like just having that non-distract. That's one of the things I love about doing a podcast like this. It's so fun to be able to sit down with somebody and just chat for a while, and not have any distractions. And so it's really cool. I appreciate it. I appreciate Camilla suggesting and thank you for being down. And even though neither of us are traveling right now, when you two when you and your husband start traveling again, if you make it out to San Francisco, I'd love to take you out. I was supposed to be in Baltimore in March. I'd love to spend a little time in person one of these days in the future. That'd be lovely.
Absolutely. We can go have crab cakes or something in Baltimore at some point if you eat those.
Oh, I do indeed. I have a great memory of crab cakes on the waterfront in Baltimore, maybe 5-6 years ago, and I'd love to do that. Alan, thank you so much for chatting. Folks, we've got links to his website, The Artist's Way, and that sort of thing in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to Camila. Apologies for saying Patricia in that episode there, but I love when people give me a suggestion for a guest, and today's episode was exactly that. Camila reached out to me and said, hey, I know somebody that would be a great guest for you, Alan, and I immediately said, yes, that absolutely. And so I love hearing from people, and I take guest suggestions really seriously. I can't get to everybody. I make a note of every suggestion. I've said this many times here, but we're at the end, so you are a true fan if you've made it this far. I had an Evernote document for years and years, and 13 years to be precise. And I would take every suggestion and put it into this Evernote document. It became a mess. Then I put it all into a Google spreadsheet, and I went back to Evernote because it was just quicker. So I have this. I go back and I look through when I get ideas. Sometimes it takes me years to get to somebody because there's just only so much bandwidth to put these out. I can't put them out I guess I could, but nobody wants that. So, but I really appreciate, that's a very long way of saying, I really appreciate hearing from people listening and getting suggestions. Feedback at contrabassconversations.com is the best way. You can suggest people over social media that may or may not make it my way, but feedback at contrabassconversations.com will make it my way. I don't know why I'm speaking so fast. It's funny. I'm drinking less coffee than ever, but I think I'm speaking faster than ever. Maybe it's because I've been going for more runs, so maybe my energy level is just a little more consistent. I don't know. Regardless, we'll leave that topic, and we'll thank the team. Thank you so much to the people that put these episodes together: Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Mitch Mooring, Trevor Jones, and Krista Copper. And if you are looking for a double bass, Mitch makes beautiful instruments, award-winning instruments in Kilgore, Texas. That's east of Dallas-Fort Worth a bit. Just a great individual, too, along with everybody else on the team. And you, lovely people listening, thank you so much. I'm Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.